As we begin our conversation today, news is coming out of Israel that late this afternoon, the IDF struck the European hospital in Khan Yunis, Gaza, with a number of very large bombs, at least 9, because it was believed that Mohammed Sinwar, the brother of the mastermind of the 10/7 massacre, and the leader of Hamas in Gaza, Mohammed Sinwar, was in a bunker in the basement of the building. So he got the Nasrallah treatment, and it will take some days to confirm whether or not he is dead. That would be very good news, as he was the military commander and the political leader, having taken over for his brother as the political leader and for Mohammed Diaf as the military leader at the beginning of the war after the massacre of 10/7. Today, Donald Trump is in Saudi Arabia, and quite the pageant, quite the extraordinary series of events and ceremony. Then President Trump gave a speech, which is very, very significant. Let's begin with cut number 7.
I've come this afternoon to talk about the bright future of the Middle East, but first let me begin by sharing the abundance of good news from a place called America. In less than 4 months, our new administration has achieved more than most other administrations accomplish in 4 years or even 8 years. We've actually done, for the most part, more.
He went on to talk about that. I will say, by the way, today's inflation number down month over month, and the stock market is back to where it was when President Trump took office, having reset everything. It's rebounded. Cut number 8.
We are cutting 10 old regulations for every new regulation. We're getting rid of all of the red tape that is so many, frankly, countries, as they get older, they develop a lot of red tape, and we're getting rid of it. We're getting rid of it at record levels. And I'm pleased to report that the United States Congress is on the verge of passing the largest tax cut and regulation cut in American history. We think we're in good shape to get that. And if we get that, that will be like a rocket ship for our country. In the first quarter of the year, the investment in America was up an astounding 22%. More than $10 trillion of new investments have been announced or are coming just since the election on November 5th. So think of that. In a very short period of time, we have over $10 trillion, and it could be much higher than that. Not everybody comes to the White House to have a news conference that they're going to be opening up in America, but they're all coming in at numbers that we've never seen before. If you take a look at other presidencies, they wouldn't do $1 trillion sometime in years. We did this in essentially 2 months because you have to say we got into office and they gave me about a month to clean up and fix up the Oval Office, and after that we started working. And the money is pouring in, the jobs are pouring in, the companies are pouring into our country like we've never seen before. There's never been anything like it. And
go to cut number 9. He talked a lot about the economy, and it was very good for the audience. But let's go to cut number 9.
Exactly 8 years ago this month, I stood in this very room and looked forward to a future in which the nations of this region would drive the forces of terrorism and extremism, drive them right out of existence, and take your place among the proudest, most prosperous, most successful nations anywhere in the world as leaders of a modern and rising Middle East. So exciting, so exciting.
He did give this major speech. He gave 3 major speeches abroad in Trump term 1. One in Riyadh, one in Poland, one in Normandy. The one in Riyadh was to the world's Muslim leaders, demanding that they drive out extremism. And he's picking up where he left off. Cut number 10 on the fact that Saudi Arabia is buying a whole bunch of defense stuff from us over the next period of time. Cut number 10.
In addition to purchases of $142 billion of American-made military equipment by our great Saudi partners, the largest ever, this week there are multi-billion-dollar commercial deals with Amazon, Oracle, AMD, they're all here, Uber, Qualcomm, Johnson & Johnson, and many, many more. So I want to congratulate everybody, so many great business executives, many of you, most of you I know, and they're coming in, you know, about a month ago. They weren't that happy when they saw me, and now they're saying, "Sir, you're doing a great job. Thank you very much." It's amazing what a rising market will do. Oh, it's going to get
Let's go to cut number 11 because he's talking about the leadership ahead.
Before our eyes, a new generation of leaders is transcending the ancient conflicts of tired divisions of the past and forging a future where the Middle East is defined by commerce, not chaos, where it exports technology, not terrorism, and where people of different nations, religions, and creeds are building cities together, not bombing each other out of existence. We don't want that.
Cut number 12.
After so many decades of conflict, finally it is within our grasp to reach the future that generations before us could only dream about, a land of peace, safety, harmony, opportunity, innovation, and achievement right here in the Middle East.
Cut number 20. I'm going to get to the high-flown rhetoric now.
My preference will always be for peace and partnership whenever those outcomes can be achieved. Always. It's always going to be that way. Only a fool would think otherwise.
And then cut 21.
If the responsible nations of this region seize this moment, put aside your differences and focus on the interests that unite you, then all of humanity will soon be amazed at what they will see right here in this geographic center of the world. It really is. It's like a center of the world and the spiritual heart of its greatest faiths.
He's right about that, by the way. Now, Harley, if you could put up for our viewers on the Salem News Channel my map. I wanted people to be able to see if they were watching. I'll explain it for those of you who don't. The Middle East, the center of the world, as the president said, has got a lot of countries in it. Egypt used to be the most important of the Arab countries, still very important, but the gravity is in Saudi Arabia and Turkey. But if you look at that map, you'll see that Egypt's our ally, Saudi Arabia is our ally, Turkey's in NATO, though they're not always our ally, Oman is our ally, Yemen, not our ally, and we've been beating the heck out of the Houthis to get them to go back. Now, Jordan is our ally, Syria is a mess, and President Trump talks about, now I'll get to Israel, of course, is the equal of any of our allies around the world. It's a nuclear power, it's a superpower. It's not in the same category as the United States and China. And then over there on the right, not really part of the Middle East, more of Southeast Asia, is Iran. They're the bad guys. So as I was explaining, and I'll play it for you later, on Fox News this morning, doing color commentary of the ceremony greeting President Trump with Dana Perina and Bill Hemmer. And I said, there are allies everywhere. The equal of any of our allies is Israel, but we have strong partnerships with Saudi Arabia. United Arab Emirates has fought alongside our soldiers all over the world. The UAE is little Sparta. And Saudi Arabia has always been close to us, but they've got a problem with the Palestinian situation in Gaza because they have their own Arab people who are restive about what's going on in Gaza. So I think the message to the Israelis is, get this thing done in a hurry. But we're not leaning on Israel to capitulate or take a ceasefire. Idan Alexander returned to his family today. The only American held hostage by Gaza was there the entire time that from 10/7 until Joe Biden left office. Donald Trump got him out in 4 months. There's still 20 to 22 living hostages there, and the IDF is trying to get them out, and there's going to be a new round of peace talks. And maybe with Mohammed Sinwar dead, if that is in fact what happened, Hamas will begin to realize their best option is to raise a white flag and get on a boat and go to Iran and huddle somewhere in Iran where Mossad can't reach them, though there are very few places that Mossad can't reach. That map shows you it's a very small region. We got lots of friends there, and we don't have to worry about Iran. We can take Iran down. In fact, President Trump talked about Iran today. He said this, cut number 15.
Yet I'm here today not merely to condemn the past chaos of Iran's leaders, but to offer them a new path and a much better path toward a far better and more hopeful future. As I've shown repeatedly, I am willing to end past conflicts and forge new partnerships for a better and more stable world even if our differences may be very profound, which obviously they are in the case of Iran. I have never believed in having permanent enemies. I am different than a lot of people think. I don't like permanent enemies, but sometimes you need enemies to do the job, and you have to do it right. Enemies get you motivated. In fact, some of the closest friends of the United States of America are nations we fought wars against in generations past, and now they're our friends and our allies.
Noah C. Rothman, senior writer at National Review. Noah, again and again, Donald Trump says Iran has two choices. He told me last week they can dismantle it nicely or we can dismantle it viciously. I don't think there's any ambiguity here. Do you think it's clear that either they dismantle or we blow them up?
I think that's the binary the president is retailing. Iran, from what we're hearing, seems to be toying with notions that sort of comport with the president's framework, but I don't think are sufficient. And I'm hoping that the White House doesn't think they're sufficient, like the notion that it would engage in some sort of a joint enrichment program with regional partners, including Saudi Arabia, which seems to me to be unworkable. But it's also just a desire to give the president something that he can point to and say deal, and avoid what should be the outcome of this process, which is the total verifiable dismantling of all of its enrichment programs. Oh, and by the way, the ballistic missile program as well. That's what I think the president's goal should be, a maximalist objective. We'll see what we get to. But I think the president is right to say my way or the highway.
That is his repeated statement. Against the backdrop of that statement again in Riyadh today, Israel announced a massive 9-wave assault on the European hospital, which was believed to have a bunker in which Mohammed Sinwar was hiding. If, in fact, it's confirmed that he's dead, that means they may be out of leadership. There'll be someone lying around who will pick up the mantle. They might start shooting at each other pretty soon. Do you think there might be an end in sight there?
I don't know. I think the war in Gaza is about to heat up in ways that will really stress and strain the relationship that the Netanyahu administration has been, or government has been, building with this administration. But that's hardly the most important thing that I think came out of the president's visit to Riyadh today. If I had to posit a real earth-shattering revelation that the president revealed today, it would be his decision to withdraw sanctions on the Syrian government, the post-Assad Syrian government. This is something I've been following pretty closely. There has been a real ideological conflict within the administration over how to approach the post-Assad regime in Syria. It has been one that has pitted one side of this conflict, roughly represented by Tulsi Gabbard and Seb Gorka, against the other side, which favors engagement, which by and large you could say is more or less the Marco Rubio position. And it seems the Rubio position is winning out. And I think there's reason for optimism when it comes to the Syrian regime. They have been walking the walk when they've also, they've been soliciting foreign direct investment from Europe and from North America. And they've been doing things that reflect a desire to have a more liberal social covenant and certainly to be a steward of American interests. Before this, Representative Corey Mills was on the ground in Syria. And before his visit, the administration said, listen, we want you to take some steps to roll up some of these Iran-led organizations like Palestinian Islamic Jihad. And they did it. The Syrian regime did it. And I think they deserve to be rewarded for those displays of faith. We have traded an Iran-led Syrian regime for a Turkish proxy in Damascus. That presents its own set of problems, but it's desirable to truncate the Iranian axis of fire around Israel. Iran lost a partner in Damascus, and I think it's a good thing for the United States to attempt to shore up an emerging Western-led regime in that country. We should be very cautious about what it is and what its desires are for the region. But it's certainly an improvement over having an Iranian vassal in Damascus. And I think the Trump administration leaning into that and not assuming that it is a terrorist proxy and thus creating a self-fulfilling prophecy for itself, I think that's a very good thing. It's a hopeful sign.
Here's what the president said about that today in Riyadh, cut number 19.
Likewise, in Syria, which has seen so much misery and death, there is a new government that will hopefully succeed in stabilizing the country and keeping peace. That's what we want to see in Syria. They've had their share of travesty, war, killing. many years. That's why my administration has already taken the first steps toward restoring normal relations between the United States and Syria for the first time in more than a decade. And I'm very pleased to announce that Secretary Marco Rubio will be meeting with the new Syrian foreign minister in Turkey later this week. And very importantly, after discussing the situation in Syria with the Crown Prince, your Crown Prince, and also with President Erdogan of Turkey, who called me the other day and asked for a very similar thing, among others, and friends of mine, people that I have a lot of respect for in the Middle East, I will be ordering the cessation of sanctions against Syria in order to give them a chance at greatness.
Now, no, I have not followed this other than through Israeli media, and they're intent on protecting the Druze and making sure that the government in Damascus does not advance towards Israel. Give me some of the details of Tulsi Seb versus Rubio. I haven't followed that at all.
Well, listen, the Tulsi Gabbard Seb Gorka side is not without evidence to support its proposition, which is essentially that we can't trust this government. It is too closely aligned with Islamist terrorists, specifically Al-Qaeda, because al-Jawlani, who goes by the name now al-Shahar, it was aligned with al-Nusra. Al-Nusra was an offshoot of Al-Qaeda. And if you were to draw a straight line from that ideological ascension, you would say, okay, well, this is an Al-Qaeda government. But al-Jawlani has been undergoing a reputational renovation, not even predating the collapse of the Assad regime. And he has made outreach to Syrian Christians. He appeared very prominently in the cathedral in Aleppo. There's sectarian violence in Syria. This is still many parts of Syria are still lawless and ungoverned. And there's evidence that this regime is attempting to roll up some of its, Assad era grievances with the last regime. But it is vastly preferable from an American perspective, to say nothing of the Israeli perspective, to have a Syria that is aligned with the Sunni kingdoms in the region, the UAE and Saudi Arabia primarily, and not with Iran and the Axis of Fire, which it was previously. Syria under Bashar al-Assad slaughtered its own citizens, eviscerated the prohibition on the use of chemical weapons on the battlefield. It sponsored terrorist campaigns inside Iraq when the United States was inside Iraq. It's directly and indirectly responsible for the killing of Americans. The United States had to exercise cross-border raids into Assad's Syria. And when this regime was beginning to collapse, the Assad regime incubated ISIS by purchasing its own oil from this terrorist network, which eventually became the Islamic State, the Islamic Caliphate that we had to collapse. Syria was an endless headache for us, and it is no longer. And we should cement that relationship. And a good faith gesture like removing sanctions, which can be restored, is something that I think is a valuable enterprise, just to take that chess piece off the Iranian board and add it to our own.
Well said, Noah Rothman. Great contribution today. Thank you. Follow him on X at Noah C. Rothman. Listen to him frequently on The Editors, the podcast of National Review, which comes out twice a week. I'll do a market recap next hour, but the S&P appears to have wiped out all of their 2025 losses as a rally is extending. Now, we have a sponsor, Job Creators Network, and they are pushing the House Republicans to move with taxcutsnow.com. Job Creators Network understands that the Trump boom in his first term that was brought to an unfortunate and quick close by COVID and its release from the Wuhan lab needs to be revitalized. The tax cuts need to be extended. They need to be extended now. Well, yesterday, Republicans released their tax plan in the House. It boosts the SALT deduction. It ends green energy breaks. It proposes ending taxes on some tipping, some overtime pay. It extends and makes permanent Trump's 2017 tax cuts. That's all very good. There's a lot of silly stuff in there. There's some meh and some but there's no tax hike on the highest rate. I would have liked the Roth conversion window. That's not in there, but it's not a finished product. But there are no tax hikes. And I go over to taxcutsnow.com. taxcutsnow.com and push, 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 because the first step has been taken. It should come out of committee today. Then they wait on Ag and Energy and Commerce to get the big reconciliation bill and all of its points. Then Speaker Johnson and Leader Scalise get together and they negotiate with all sides. And of course, we got some negotiating in public going on between the Freedom Caucus and the folks who want even higher SALT deduction, state and local tax deduction. I don't care where it ends up. I want them to get it done by July 4 so that the small business owners in America have certainty and can move forward. So go to taxcutsnow.com and join in that. So Generalissimo, another one of our sponsors is myphdweightloss.com, 864
644
1900. That's
864
644
1900.
I wonder if you caught President Trump doing his fat guy joke yesterday.
I did, yes.
Yeah. He's got a guy, he said, the fat drug. I got a friend who says the fat drug costs $88
I think it was
in London.
I think it was the fat shot is what he said.
The fat shot.
Yeah.
But he said his friend is a big guy and a fat guy, and he got the fat shot in London for $88, and he got the fat shot in the United States for $1,000. He said, what is going on? What is going on? And it was very funny, but it also underscored the point we're making. If you sign up for the drugs, you're paying in the United States $1,000 a month for the rest of your life if you're going to keep the weight off. That's not myphdweightloss.com, 864
644
1900. No fat shots in that, right?
No, that's not the preferred method. It just isn't. I mean, why put yourself through all that when if you just modify your diet and commit to it, you can lose the weight. You can then eat a sensible, responsible diet when you get to the desired weight, add things back in, and have learned the tools so that you can adjust down the road, even if you put on a few
But who
pounds.
doesn't want to spend $1,000 a month to get a shot?
Me.
Okay, and Dwayne made it work. Go to myphdweightloss.com, sign up and do it. It works. I ran into someone in Minneapolis who was working on it and thanked us, 864
644
1900. Now I got to do the one thing I take. I don't need my PhD weight loss. I didn't run today. I did final exam grading. That was my morning. Got one class done and turned in. Have to do second class tomorrow. You know what it's like, everyone out there who's a professor of anything but law school exams. Oy. But I'm taking my relief factor anyway because I take it every single day, even when I don't get my miles in, when I have an excuse. Like, the best time to grade a test is actually in the morning when you're sharp, because there are fine distinctions you got to draw. There's a mandatory curve in law school, and you got to assign a 2.0, a 2.5, and there's one 4.0, and there's got to be a curve. And so you got to be sharp, you got to be fair. These young students put everything into it. Relief factor, I got my 5 miles in yesterday, but then the test came yesterday afternoon. So now I'm in test mode. And test mode means it's a different kind of ache and pain. Actually, about 8:30 last night, my back was killing me because I've been hunched over these tests. So I took my relief factor, and I'm fine. The minor aches and pains go away with a good night's sleep and relief factor. Try the starter pack, $19.95, less than $1 a day. Icarian and curcumin, resveratrol, omega. Call 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief, 1-800-4-RELIEF, or go to their website and find that starter pack for $19.95. Again, less than $1 a day. Head there at relieffactor.com. That's relieffactor.com. You will thank me that you did. I've been doing a lot of television work in the last couple of days, doing commentary on President Trump's visit abroad. I was on with Bill Hemmer and Dana Perino this morning for a long period of time as the president and the crown prince, surrounded by members of the governments of both countries, got together to sign a series of exchanges. Here is that, cut number 2.
Hugh Hewitt joins our conversation. Hugh, good morning to you.
Morning.
There was someone who said what Donald Trump believes is that commerce is the key to cooperation. And if you do good business together, there's not to suggest that there's disagreement between people, but there's a lot more agreement in there. And this seems to be at the center of all the CEOs have been shaking hands with MBS and the president earlier today.
I think you got that right, Bill, and good morning, Dana and Bill.
Morning.
I remember the first trip that President Trump took in his first term. It was to Riyadh. he gave an important speech, very strong speech to the leaders of the Muslim world, calling on them to reject extremism. Very strong speech, very well received. This time it's business, business, business. Now, our allies in the region are Israel, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia. And we hope that Saudi Arabia joins the Abraham Accords and invests in America. What the Saudis want is the nuclear power that the UAE has, the highest level of protection and security. Usually we've linked that with them joining the Abraham Accords. I hope that happens. The investment is great, but I also have to believe, Bill and Dana, that when the doors are closed, everybody is talking about when is the United States with Israel going to strike the Iranian nuclear facilities, because Iran threw down on Steve Witkoff in round 4. They said they're not giving up their enrichment. They're not dismantling. Well, that's a red line. The president told me last week on my program they can dismantle it nicely or we can dismantle it viciously. Looks like it's going to be viciously against the backdrop, a very important backdrop of this alliance of friendly states.
I wanted to also bring that up from his perspective. You talked to him last week, and I think we played a little bit of that. And then this was him yesterday, President Trump, on Iran.
In the midst of talking to him, and they're right now acting very intelligent. We want Iran to be wealthy and wonderful and happy and great, but they can't have a nuclear weapon. It's very simple. So I think they understand that I mean business, and I think they're being very reasonable thus far.
One thing, Hugh, is that the president has repeated this over and over again, and yet bubbling up through all sorts of different media is concern that he might not mean it, that he might allow Iran to do that. I don't get that to be the case at all. And a trip like this one, is it maybe meant to solidify his message to the Iranians?
I think it is, Dana. I think you're exactly right. And he says it every day, one way or the other. They can't have the nuke. Sometimes he goes on at length about, dismantling it viciously. And he mentioned earlier he's going to Turkey because he insisted on a meeting with President Erdogan because he wants to bring Qatar and Turkey into this alliance against the Iranian Islamist extremist fanatics. And the Persian people are wonderful. We'd love that regime to collapse. It's not popular with its people. They ran out of gas and energy. They're an oil state, and they ran out of energy this past winter. There's a lot of nakedness on their part. Their skies are open because of Israel strikes on them. So now is the time for our allies to come together and back the president. The business matters a lot. The investment in the United States and our reciprocity with Saudi Arabia, like UAE and Bahrain, would be terrific. But what really matters to that region is getting rid of the provocateur Ayatollah Khamenei and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps and their nuclear program and their ballistic missiles.
Iran's deputy foreign minister was in Saudi Arabia and Qatar and the UAE before the president even arrived there, and that happened earlier this week. Just to remark on a few things here. We're watching a lot of the screens here. This president brought a lot of people with him. I saw Pete Hegseth there and Howard Lutnick. I saw John Katzimatidis, who's a big billionaire here in New York. So a lot of these folks are on the road.
And Chris Wright from the Department of Energy.
Yeah, saw him. And the other thing, Hugh, is that in light of Pope Leo last week, when he talked about being a new pope in a new era with artificial intelligence, you had Sam Altman from OpenAI. You had Elon Musk there today. You had Jensen Huang, who founded NVIDIA. And the Saudis, UAE, they all want this, and they're all aligned to get more energy into their country to drive these computers. And I just think those two events from last week and this week seem to be like a seminal moment, potentially, in humankind. And I know that's a big statement, but I think for the moment it might be appropriate.
That's a big statement that's supported by the reality of the innovation that can come with AI properly harnessed. It does require an enormous amount of energy, more than oil can provide in the long term, required nuclear power of the sort that the UAE and Israel have. And that's why I keep returning to the fact all the technology is coming from us and from Israel on AI. We can't let the Chinese communists win that race. So we need Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Bahrain to be involved in that, both with location for AI, but they know as well as we know, we've got the technology, Israel's got the technology, they want the technology, Saudi. And so there's going to be a deal here. It's going to be massive. I just hope it includes Israel explicitly as opposed to implicitly. I'll come back to the rest of the play-by-play. I love doing play-by-play with Bill and Dana. Didn't quite love the camera shot there, but we'll take what we can. I love doing commentary with Bill and Dana. I'm going to do a special report tomorrow night. I was on with Katie Pavlik last night on the same subject, doing more on the same subject. In fact, let's play that. I'll save that. Let me tell you about Andrew and Todd instead, because the economic news is feeling very good. You know, I've been saying for months, they've been in office 115 days. Oh, it's terrible. It's awful. Well, the S&P's back to where it was when he came in after Liberation Day trade shock. And the NASDAQ's up. It's in a bull market now. And inflation is down. And I think we'll have a positive GDP in Q2. Might go down a little bit in Q3. We've got the world to agree to the 10% baseline tariff, which is our saving the world's freedom of passage. Well, Andrew and Todd are prepared to help you in this new economic golden age buy a house. They are lenders with Sierra Pacific Mortgage, our sponsor. But you want to deal with Andrew Del Rey or Todd Avakian. I've known Andrew for 25 years. We get together every Wednesday morning. Now I do Zoom. I'm back in the group. I had to leave the group when I moved from California to DC to the Beltway. And now I just join the group on Wednesday mornings via Zoom. And that's great. But I see Andrew and Todd there, and we're talking about scripture or something. But now I'm telling you, if you're going to buy a house, AndrewandTodd.com, 888-1172. Most important thing when you get someone to do a loan with you is that they underwrite it themselves, like AndrewandTodd.com do, and that you can trust Todd Avakian and Andrew Del Rey. Good men with your best interest at heart. Call them today. If you got to move or you simply need to refinance or you want a reverse mortgage because you're a senior and you're eligible, you're over 65 in your own house, maybe it's 62, call them, 888-1172. Okay, time for me to get on my soapbox. I saw in the Wall Street Journal today a story about ESPN. ESPN's new streaming service will cost $29.99 a month. And I said to myself, are they crazy? Are they crazy? $30 a month for ESPN. Now I have Disney and Hulu. And in fact, I'm watching on Paramount Mobland. Whew, that's a pretty brutal show, by the way. But we love Helen Mirren and Pierce Brosnan, and Pierce Brosnan plays a fabulous bad guy. And Tom Hardy is Tom Hardy. And so it's a terrific show. We'll watch an hour a day. We got about 4 episodes to go. And so I've already got too many services, and I'm waiting for the magic bundle to come along. And I have YouTube TV. So I really don't want to pay $29.99 for ESPN. I said, I've already got Disney Plus, I've got Hulu. And Hulu is $9.99 a month, and Disney Plus is $9.99 a month. So that's $20 I'm giving to ESPN. They said, okay, we will throw in ESPN, Hulu, and Disney for $35.99. So that's an additional $16. I'm just talking like a consumer here, because what I'm going to tell you about is consumercellular.com. And I'm saying, okay, do I really want ESPN for $16? Because that's the bottom line. It would be $16 more a month if I take that bundle along with every other bundle. It's amazing to be a cord cutter. By the way, poor cable companies, they're dead. The Salem News Channel is on everywhere, including YouTube TV and Fubo and Pluto TV, and I can't even follow how fast Salem News Channel is growing. It's all the rage. You go over the top and bundle and go this way. So we're on pretty much everything you turn on. And so you can be watching me as well as listening to me in your car on your drive home. But I think to myself, I am not really, I got to find a way. I'm a penny pincher. If I'm going to do that bundle, I got to find a way to cut $10 out. Here's the way for you to cut $10 out. I said I added Consumer Cellular to my life. And that's because you do not have to sacrifice savings for service. You can have both. You can save money and you don't have to sacrifice a thing. You end up with savings without any sacrifice. You get absolutely top-notch service. You call their number, 1-800-411-4454. 1-800-411-4454. And when you're in the car, you can't remember a phone number, I'll tell it to you. 1-800-411, not 311, not 511, it's 411. And then since it's 411, you can remember 4454. That's an easy number, 1-800-411-4454. Or you can go to consumercellular.com/Hugh. Here's where you save the money. You probably don't even know how much you're spending on your cell phone. The big cellular companies don't want you to take too close of a look. If you need unlimited data, you can get 2 lines for $60 a month. You get the second month free when you give my name, Hugh. If you don't need that, if you only need 8 gigs, you're just a very basic user of cell service, tell them you want the de minimis, the very tiny plan, 8 gigs a month, and save a lot of money. But again, consumercellular.com/Hugh, or call 1-800-411-4454 and tell them Hugh sent you, and you'll get that second month free. Keep your number, keep your data, or get a new number and wipe all that data free. Just call them. You'll talk to a real live person in America after one touch. On a very important day in national security and international affairs, to discuss President Trump's trip to Riyadh, let's turn to an individual who is with him, Bret Baier, host of Special Report. I don't know if Special Report, are you staying up tonight to host Special Report from like 2 o'clock in the morning in Saudi Arabia, Bret?
1 a.m. to 2 a.m. Yep, we did it last night, doing it tonight, and then I'm off to Doha in the morning and doing it in Doha, and then off to Abu Dhabi and finishing the week in Abu Dhabi.
You know, I like to take people behind the lives of why I am a studio journalist and not one of you roving reporters. What does that do to your body?
You know, I get a little bit of a nap during the day because everybody is still sleeping on the East Coast of the U.S., and so get up, do some things, get a little nap, and but the day is busy, and today was really busy, and saw, you know, really interesting exchange between President Trump and the Crown Prince, MBS, interesting speech at a Saudi U.S. investor forum, that the president essentially is going to, one, come out of here with about $1 trillion of investment in the U.S., two, will have issued a stark warning to Iran that they're never going to get a nuclear weapon, and if they don't get to the table and do a deal that dismantles their nuclear weapons, that all bets are off. And three, that he's going to try to bring Syria into the fold.
I have played all those clips. That's why this is a big trip. That's why I do envy you watching history up close. This is sort of like a State of the Union for our major allies, save Israel, in the Middle East. Is there a designated survivor? Because I've seen Chris Wright, Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth doing color commentary with Bill and Dana this morning, and it looks like the entire cabinet is there, Bret Baier.
Yeah, there's, I'm trying to think who's not here. Well, obviously DHS and I think, you know, the Attorney General, there's others, but there's a lot of cabinet members here. Howard Lutnick, Commerce, State, Defense, Treasury. It's a big trip, and I think that, you know, they're looking for big things. I'm not sure that they're hopeful about Russia, Ukraine, but they are hopeful about Iran, and I think the Syria element introduced today is going to be interesting tomorrow.
Yeah, I just talked to Noah Rothman about that. He's been following it very closely, and he is applauding that as a longtime follower of national security events, that it would be good if Syria became more like the Gulf states than Iran. It's been an Iran proxy forever, so we'll see. Now, I'm wondering, how much time are they off camera? They're on camera a lot, but is the Crown Prince spending time off camera with Secretary Rubio and the President?
Yeah, they spent a lot of time after the formal meeting. There was a lunch, then they had a bilat. They signed agreements, had a little downtime, but then got back together, met again, and then went to this investor forum. They've also spent a lot of time with CEOs, tech CEOs. A lot of business people from the U.S. are here. Steve Schwartzman, Blackstone, Larry Fink from BlackRock, Jensen Huang from NVIDIA. There's a bunch of folks, and they're all making deals. I mean, there's a lot of deals that are happening on the sidelines of this trip.
Now, Bret, this morning Bill asked me about what's on the table. And if AI is being discussed, Saudi Arabia will need a nuclear facility that is the equal of the UAE. The UAE has set the gold standard. That's what they call it, the gold standard. It's safe, it's modern, it's very, very amazingly productive. Anyone talk to you about whether or not the Saudis are going to get their nuclear program? Normally, they had said the Abraham Accords have to be a part of that, but what do you hear?
Well, I was talking to Secretary Wright, and I think they're heading down that road, and it may be tied to whatever ends up happening with Iran. If Iran agrees to a dismantlement, immediately, and in exchange for a civilian program, sort of like a step down that UAE did. I would expect Saudi Arabia to have something similar engaged, because you're right, power is going to be a big thing. They're buying more chips than anybody just by this deal, because the cap has been lifted off, and their ability to buy NVIDIA chips and everything else.
Now, has the word trickled back there yet that Israel struck the European hospital in Gaza with 9 waves of fighter planes, believing that Mohammed Sinwar was in a bunker and that he got the Nasrallah treatment? Has word of that spread through the delegation?
Just starting to. It's late. They just finished up dinner at Dahria, the birthplace of the kingdom. That's where actually I'm anchoring my show from. So hoping to get some reaction, but it was just coming over as they were finishing up dinner.
All right, last question, Brett, then you got to go get ready for your show. When you do a show from Riyadh, I mean, this is very different for where we normally have shows produced from, and you normally do your show. Do the Saudis have this down? Do they know exactly what you need technically? It's a very advanced country, obviously, but television production to your standards pretty high.
Yeah, so this particular facility where we are going is a UNESCO site, but it's also around it a $63 billion project that is that essentially has every single thing that you could imagine, including electrical power and plug-in.
I guess they'll have enough outlets. 63. Yeah. Well, Brett Baer will be watching tonight. Special report starts at 6 p.m. in the East here in the United States and 1 a.m. or midnight in Saudi Arabia. Yeah, okay. Go for it, Brett Baer, Iron Man. You and the president. Thank you. I really think I'm so glad not to be in that business, because I go to bed at like 9 o'clock after I watch 1 hour of television. Here is part 2 of my conversation with Dana and Bill this morning. Cut number 3.
Hugh Hewitt is still with us. And Hugh, just a comment on the fact that Israel is not on this trip. As far as we know, maybe there's a trip at the tail end of this week to Turkey, but we'll put that on the back burner for now. I also believe that that Benjamin Netanyahu is fully clued in as to the proceedings this week. Would you agree with that?
I do, Bill. And I make nothing of the story that there's daylight between Israel and the United States. The only leader of a country who has been to the White House twice under Trump term 2 is Benjamin Netanyahu. I bet you they talk a few times each week. Everything is being coordinated down to the level that when President Trump and his team secured the release of Idan Alexander yesterday, the Israeli-American citizen, the IDF paused its fighting for 2 hours to make sure that his release went well. So obviously, everybody knows what's going on. He did not go to Israel in Trump 1 when he began with Saudi Arabia. So this is just a repeat of that. The Israelis know that the phone is always open. The lines are always going. Secretary Rubio is there. Secretary Hegseth. The president, everybody who talks to Israel and supports Israel is there. I don't think supporters of Israel in the United States, friends of Israel in the United States, have to worry about anything. This is just a step-by-step process. And I don't know if that trip to Turkey, as you mentioned, that's not official yet. Trump wants it to happen. We would love for all of our friends in the region, we have many, to get along, and especially to get along in an alliance against Iran and on the business side, as Dana said, business, business, business. MBZ, who runs UAE, used to be the number one guy, but you're looking at a very young crown prince. MBS is very young. Get used to it, America. He's going to be there, God willing, and his health stays up. He's going to be there for 30 or 40 years. Donald Trump's got 3.5, but that guy on the right, 30 to 40 years.
Hey, Hugh, we just saw Pete Hegseth signing an agreement with his counterpart. Talk a little bit about that and the importance there.
Well, they do buy a lot of weapons and a lot of their defense system from American contractors. So a lot of that $600 billion is going to go to Boeing, and it's going to go to Lockheed, and it's going to go to the missile manufacturers. Not big on the Navy side like General Dynamics, but they do need a lot of missiles. They need a lot of air defense, and that they become a primary buyer of American weaponry and American defense systems is a very good thing. I'm sure they want Iron Dome for the kingdom because the Houthis let loose with a few shots at them over the years that hit their airport. So Saudi Arabia is going to be very good for the United States defense establishment.
Yeah, earlier this month, they announced approval to sell $3.5 billion dollars worth of air-to-air missiles for Saudi Arabia's fighter jets, of which a few of them, some F-15s, gave an escort to Air Force One flying into Riyadh earlier today before the American people woke up. Hugh, on the Abraham Accords, what is the possibility of an agreement being achieved during the term of Donald Trump over the next
Let's pause that. I want to make sure my answer is complete, and we haven't got enough time to get out of that segment without doing it. I do remind you, taxcutsnow.com. Please go there because we need to get the Republicans in the Senate and the House to start working on the detail. I mean, they got to get it done. I don't know why it's not done now. Taxcutsnow.com. Great people at work. I know there's a lot of horse trading. There's different diversity. But there isn't really an alternative because we can't have taxes go up by 68%, as Donald Trump told me on this show last week. Go to our sponsor's website, our sponsors, Job Creators Network. Their website is taxcutsnow.com. Add your voice to the voice of everyone saying to the Republicans in the House and the Senate, thank you so much for working this hard. Close the deal. Taxcutsnow.com. Taxcutsnow.com. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, welcome to Studio North. We're going to be redoing this for the next month. But I like it the way it is, but it's going to change. I want to bring you up to speed on the market. Now, I told you earlier today the S&P has wiped out its 2025 losses. It's extending its rally. The NASDAQ has entered bull market territory. We had a mixed market today. This market report brought to you by our sponsor, AmericanFederal.com. More on Nick Grovich and his team in a moment. They buy and sell gold. Their phone number is 1-800-221-7694, 1-800-221-7694, or AmericanFederal.com. It was a mixed market today. The Dow went down 0.64 points, but the S&P, the broad market, went up 0.72. The tech-heavy NASDAQ went up 1.61%. Gold went up. Now, this is counterintuitive given that there's a rally underway in stocks, that gold would also go up. But again, gold is a hedge on everything. Gold is the safety valve for everybody's diverse portfolio, and it went up 0.78% today to 3,253. So if you bought on the dip yesterday, and I don't make recommendations, I just tell you what talking heads say. People buy on dips or try to. I have no idea when dips are going to happen, so I don't do that. I'm a dummy on the market. I just buy the broad market, have some gold, have some dirt, have some cash, have some stocks, and mutual funds. That's what I do. I've got a couple of stocks that I like, but it's mostly an index, and that's because there are people, smart people, who do this all day long. If you want to add some precious metals, and I've always believed a diverse portfolio has at least 10% in dirt and gold. And some people have more than that, but I'm not a gold bug. I'm not crazy about it. I just do it once a year. I'm doing it with Nick Grovich now because I sat down with Nick 2 years ago. I said, hey, Nick, thank you for becoming my sponsor. I've heard you for years with Dennis Prager, and you're the kind of guy I like to do business with. You're straightforward. You are transparent. You're telling like it is. Here is what I've got. What do you want? Do you want to buy gold? Do you want to buy by the ounce, by the half ounce, by the quarter ounce? Do you want to buy by the gold bar? Do you want to buy a lot? Do you want to buy a little? He's done seven-figure deals routinely. So a lot of people want to diversify, and they've got 7 figures to put in the gold. That's Nick. Commission's very low on a 7-figure deal. You want to buy, $1,000 of gold, commission's going to be higher. If you want to sell, it depends on what you are selling. But Nick will walk you through it. He's got an expert team. They've been in business 42. I got to know when the calendar turns, and I can start to say 43 years. Most important thing when you're buying or selling precious metal, whether it's gold, platinum, or silver, is that you trust the people on the other end of the phone. They can do all the special stuff if you want the IRA, the gold IRA. That's fine. They can do that too. But they're mostly in the business of selling you gold, and you put it in your safety deposit box and forget about it. Next number, again, 1-800-221-7694. I want to go back to the conclusion of my conversation with Bill and Dana. We were talking about, Bill had asked, what about the Abraham Accords and Saudi Arabia? Here's my answer.
of Donald Trump over the next 3.5 years? I ask that with trepidation, only because you read a lot of the material now out of Saudi Arabia, and Mohammed bin Salman is saying we need a resolution on a Palestinian state. And I don't necessarily recall several years ago, pre-October 7th, as that being a demand that he had necessarily stated publicly. Do you think his position has changed, or do you think the way he has expressed himself, has that changed?
It's the latter, Bill. I think MBS very much wants to be in partnership with Israel. Again, Israel's the technology engine of the region. They make the advances in AI that we don't make, and they know how to get this stuff done. And MBS wants his country to be ready for when the oil runs out in a couple of centuries. So he needs Israeli technology, Israeli know-how. He can't get the Abraham Accord deal signed until after Gaza is peaceful. So I suspect that it won't happen on this trip. That would be a wonderful windfall if it did. But I do believe it will happen in this term, because I believe President Trump will support Israel bringing the war in Gaza to a successful conclusion, which means the exit of Hamas and the recovery of all the hostages and the bodies of those murdered by the terrorists. But I think that MBS is going to wait until that actually happens and there's quiet. As one of my guests told me, the Saudis want quiet. Dr. Warren, Ambassador Warren said they want quiet before they move forward, and I'm sure everybody in that room wants quiet. The same message last night. I was with Katie Pavlik, who's sitting in for Sean Hannity, who's also with Brett Baer in Riyadh, and Peter Doocy. They must have their own plane. They might have chartered a plane. Here is my conversation with Katie Pavlik last night, cut one.
Also have with us now Hugh Hewitt, Fox News contributor. Hugh, we've just been talking about this trip that the president is on. Of course, there's a number of different countries involved here. Not all of them have gotten along in the past. There's obviously the Iran component. What are you looking for when it comes to President Trump's trip to the Middle East?
Good evening, Katie. I'm looking for a repeat of his first trip to Saudi Arabia in Trump 1, where he started in the kingdom. He brought together the allies of the United States in the area into the Abraham Accords, and without Saudi Arabia. So the big home run is getting the runway open for Saudi Arabia to join the Abraham Accords, if not on this trip, then down the road. And I'm sure they're having conversations about a strike on Iran, because the president made clear to me last week on the program, I'm sure you saw, he has said the same thing over and over again. Iran can either dismantle its centrifuges and turn over its uranium, or it gets bombed by Israel and or us at the same time. So I think he's working that out with MBS and MBZ. They're going to be on board. And to Qatar, he's going to say, work harder to get Hamas to surrender and leave, because Israel is not going to agree to a ceasefire. I don't think Israel's going to leave Gaza to Hamas to take over again. So I've got great expectations. It's kind of a repeat of Trump term 1 when he started with Saudi Arabia. He's starting there again, and I think that's a great sign for what's ahead.
So, Hugh, I was talking to Aaron
Now,
about
to what
how
Donald
the
Trump had
president
to say today in the beginning of his forum speech, cut number 6.
With this historic state visit, we celebrate more than 80 years of close partnership between the United States and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Ever since President Franklin Roosevelt met with King Solomon's father, King Abdul Aziz, aboard the USS Quincy in 1945, the U.S. Saudi relationship has been a bedrock of security and prosperity. Today we reaffirm
number 12.
this important bond, and we take after so many decades of conflict, finally it is within our grasp to reach the future that generations before us could only dream about: a land of peace, safety, harmony, opportunity, innovation, and achievement right here in the Middle East.
I think he's doing a great job on this trip, and it's off to a good start. Get off to a good start with the relief factor. I took it in hour number 1. If you were watching on the Salem News Channel, you saw me take it. And I'll tell you right now, I do it every day, even though this is the week from not so fortunate a place because I'm doing grading exams. So it's every other day out in the air and getting my exercise. But relieffactor.com. And I'm doing a lot of lifting because I got to clear this place out for the techies who are coming in to redo the studio. And so Relief Factor matters if you're doing unusual stuff. whether you're sitting for hours over exams or you're moving boxes around and shuffling books and getting ready to hang stuff and screens for a studio, no matter what you're doing, if you're doing something unusual, your body's going to say, what in the world are you doing? And minor aches and pains. Get rid of those. Banish them. Relief Factor does that. Icarian and curcumin, resveratrol, and omega works with your body. Call 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief, 1-800-4-RELIEF, or go to their website, relieffactor.com. Find the starter pack for $19.95, less than $1 a day at relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. Alex Gray is the president of American Global Strategies, former chief of staff at the National Security Council. Alex, you must be watching this Riyadh event with a bit of jealousy. You'd be there if you wanted to, but you wanted to stay on the outside and help them from the outside. What do you make of the meetings going on?
Well, I think this is we have an opportunity, Hugh, to continue and to build upon, I think, one of the president's biggest foreign policy successes of term one, which was establishing deterrence against Iran. In the speech he just gave in Riyadh, he made very clear where he stands on deterrence. He applied the Reagan-esque big stick, made clear, despite maybe contrary statements from some folks around him or in the ecosystem, how he feels about Iran having nuclear breakout. And this is kind of the ball game, Hugh. I mean, this is the opportunity to fundamentally change the Middle East through economic engagement, through the business deals that he's doing, through, I think he'll eventually get an extension of the Abraham Accords to multiple Arab states. And really, this is going to be a fundamental part of the Trump legacy, is turning the Middle East into a place where we have Iran boxed in and we have China boxed out and we have American interests working with our Arab partners and with Israel on the ascendant.
This is soft power at its finest. Now, Alex Gray, I was asked by Bill Hemmer this morning about AI. And, I know how to spell AI, and that's about it. But I do know it requires a massive amount of energy, which usually means nuclear power, like the UAE has, the gold-plated plan. Do you think that's in the books for Saudi Arabia to get the kind of nuclear civil program that the UAE has so that they can keep up and help us keep up with AI?
I think a civil nuclear program for the Saudis that includes things like small modular reactors, I think that's going to have to be a must. And I know that it makes people uncomfortable. And we have kind of in Washington, Hugh, this non-proliferation, clerisy, where the idea that we have to, follow the kind of traditional dictates of non-proliferation theory. And if anybody gets a civil nuclear program that could, down the road lead to nuclear breakout, let's be very clear. The Saudis are not Iran. The Saudis are not North Korea. The Saudis are a critical American ally. And I think one of the critical things here is to establish with the Saudis a relationship for the long term on the economic side, on the technology side, and on the military side that's going to last well into the next century.
Now, Alex, an announcement was made of $162 billion of arms purchases from the United States arms manufacturers. What do the Saudis buy from us primarily?
Well, the Saudis buy everything from long-range missiles, Tomahawk missiles, Patriot batteries, the fighter aircraft. Look, I'd like to see the Saudis buying substantially more than they buy now. When I was at the White House, I worked on this extensively. The United States we should have the preeminent defense export market in the world. We should be exporting our defense. We have the best aerospace, the best maritime, the best land force equipment in the world. Our platforms should be in every allied army. And unfortunately, Hugh, we have this hangover from the Vietnam era where we don't do the types of things as a government we should do to promote our arms industry globally, the way the Koreans do, the way the Germans do. Every American partner should be buying an Abrams tank. Every American partner should be buying the appropriate fighter jet, whether that's the F-35 or the F-16 or whatever it might be. We don't push for that as a government. President Trump is the first American president in decades who made it a priority to try and get our partners and allies to buy American kit. And that's going to be critical as we deal with the threats of the future, particularly China.
Last question for you, Alex. When you talk about selling stuff to the Saudis and the modular reactors, small modular reactors, do we have any other countries who are interested in that technology? UAE bought the traditional big big nuclear program. Are there other people out there for SMRs?
So I actually think the SMR market is a tremendous opportunity. I would point even to the small islands in the Pacific portfolio I had at the NSC before I was chief of staff. We have a huge opportunity for small island states that are dependent on imported electricity or imported gas. Small modular reactors could be the difference between remaining a developing state and moving to that next level of development. Southeast Asia is an opportunity. Opportunities in India. So I think this is a huge untapped reserve that the U.S. can take advantage of.
Alex Gray from American Global Strategies, former chief of staff at the NSC. Thanks for joining me. Very few people out there don't have sympathy for the people who lost their homes and businesses and churches and schools in the fires that ravaged California this year and last. And my friend's former Congressman Chris Cox, longtime CPA and Chapman University accounting professor Hank Adler, got together and put an op-ed in yesterday's Los Angeles Times about the tax code and how the tax code is prohibiting and restraining rebuilding in Los Angeles. I want to read it with the hopes that maybe Chairman Jason Smith or somebody else on Wayne's and Me, Vern Buchanan, somebody is listening, because it won't take but a minute to fix this, but let me explain. This piece is entitled Tweak the Tax Code or Burned Lots Will Sit Empty for Decades. In the coming weeks, Congress will write tax and spending legislation, Adler and Cox write, that should include relief for the many victims of the Palisades and Eaton fires. But apart from the cash assistance Governor Gavin Newsom has already requested, California's congressional delegation should work to include 2 urgently needed changes to the tax code in the same legislation. Without these, rebuilding the fire-ravaged areas of Los Angeles could take years or longer. The Internal Revenue Code was not written with massive urban wildfires in mind. By taxing the revenue from those sales as income, current tax law encourages many fire victims to hold their now empty lots until death to avoid a huge tax bill. The tax code also discourages potential buyers from purchasing empty lots and building new homes because they could be penalized for selling their current homes. These perverse incentives will dramatically slow the process of rebuilding. The way to fix this is to change the way the tax law applies in presidentially declared disaster areas. Our California delegation in Washington, again, this is being written for the Los Angeles Times, so both Cox and Adler are Californians. Our California delegation in Washington should find a receptive audience in Congress for this discrete reform, because getting fire-gutted communities back on their feet isn't just an act of mercy. It's essential to restoring the tax base for both the state and the federal revenue. For the first reform, Congress should exempt victims in presidentially declared fire disaster areas from income taxes resulting from the receipt of insurance proceeds and the sale of their lots. Second, to incentivize buyers in the fire areas, Congress should allow deferral of income taxes on the sale of a principal residence if the sale proceeds are used to buy a new or principal residence in the fire areas. In the Pacific Palisades, where property values have skyrocketed over several decades, scores of homeowners have owned their properties for more than 20 years at the time of the fires. Even before disaster struck, these residents, many of them elderly, had a powerful incentive to retain their property until death. By doing so, they could forever avoid income taxes on the application of their homes. After the fire, that incentive remains, but effect has now changed dramatically now that people have been forced out of their homes. Previously, people staying in their own homes presented no particular problems for them or their communities, the tax code that is. Now people evacuating their burned out lots but continuing to hold on to them in that condition until death creates a big problem. The worst possible outcome for the communities. Original residents not rebuilding and returning, and new residents not being opportunities to build and move in. The tax bill that fire victims would face if they sell is one they might never have had to pay but for the disaster. And it is not only a product of their property's appreciation over time, insurance complicates the picture further. Under current law, property insurance proceeds reinvested in a new home are generally tax-free, but proceeds not so reinvested are subject to tax. Fire victims who sell their burned homes and downsize or relocate to a less expensive area would therefore face a tax double whammy. An elderly couple whose children have long since moved away would most likely have no interest in rebuilding, especially given the many years it may take to complete construction. For them, selling and downsizing makes the most practical sense, but not after taxes are taken into account. If they receive a big payout from their homeowner's insurance and don't devote all of it to a new home, and they sell their original property for a large sum, they could face a staggering income tax bill, easily $1 million or more. To many, this feels like an insult, coming on the heels of being forced out of their home and seeing nearly everything they once owned go up in smoke. Unfortunately, the simplest way for fire victims to avoid this financial predicament is to hold their blackened lots until death while moving on to buy elsewhere. So long as they can reinvest 100% of any insurance proceeds in a new home elsewhere, they can completely avoid these taxes. At the same time, they can borrow against the value of their lot to generate tax-free cash, using the funds to supplement the cost of a smaller home and help pay their living expenses. Great for them, perhaps, but bad for Southern California and its tax base. The other part of the tax code to be addressed concerns buyers in the fire areas. For decades, the tax rule was that buyers using the money from the sale of their principal residence to purchase a new principal residence could defer any income tax from the move if the new residence cost more than the previous one. But since 1997, the benefit of that provision has been capped at $250,000, $500,000 if married. Inflation has further reduced its value. $250,000 in 1997 equates to just $125,000 today. Restoring the pre-1997 rule for buyers in the fire areas will ensure that there are buyers as well as sellers. That will invigorate the market for reinvestment in these shattered communities. These two reforms amount to simple justice, Christopher Cox and Hank Adler conclude. Fire victims shouldn't be hit with income taxes that would never have been owed otherwise. The tax code shouldn't incentivize them to hold fire-damaged lots for the rest of their lives at the expense of the surrounding communities. Putting in place the right tax incentives for both buyers and sellers will get Altadena, Malibu, and the Pacific Palisades built back faster and better. And this, in turn, will generate tax revenue for the benefit of Californians and all American taxpayers. Christopher Cox is currently a senior scholar in residence at UC Irvine and a former chairman of the U.S. House Homeland Security Committee. Hank Adler is a professor of accounting at Chapman University, and they are wonderful, smart guys, and that's a brilliant idea. And if any of you know anybody on Ways and Means, tell them about that. It's available. It's not behind a paywall. Just Google Los Angeles Times, Adler, Cox, Palisades, and it will pop up and you can read it over again. Sometimes the most obvious things get overlooked. This is very obvious. I hope it doesn't get overlooked. Coming right back, America. Don't go anywhere. On today's Hugh Hewitt Show, if you're watching on the Salem News Channel, got some more great video to play for you of President Trump in Saudi Arabia, and audio if you're listening in your car on the drive home to the Salem Radio Network or our affiliates. Donald Trump in Saudi Arabia gave a big, important speech today. In it, he included some nuggets about the new realism in American national security policy, cut number 16.
In recent years, far too many American presidents have been afflicted with the notion that it's our job to look into the souls of foreign leaders and use U.S. policy to dispense justice for their sins. They loved using our very powerful military, and now it's really the most powerful it's ever been. We just are getting a budget approved, $1 trillion, highest budget we've ever had in history for military, $1 trillion. And we're getting the greatest missiles, the greatest weapons. And, you know, I hate to do it, but you have to do it because we believe in peace through strength. You have to have the strength, otherwise bad things could happen. But hopefully we'll never have to use any of those weapons. Seems to be an awfully big waste of money if you're never going to use them, but hopefully we'll never have to use them because the destructive power of some of those weapons are like nobody's seen before. I believe it is God's job to sit in judgment, my job to defend America, and to promote the fundamental interest of stability, prosperity, and peace. That's what I really want to do.
It's a pretty simple message. It's a great message. I have a great message for you as grads and dads become center stage, and that is besthotgrill.com. The Solaire infrared grill made by our friends over at besthotgrill.com, longtime sponsors of the show. Rhett and Irene are very good friends of mine and of Dwayne's. The Solaire infrared grill is really the best grill on the market, and they come in all different sizes and shapes. Solaire infrared grills heat up to 1,000 degrees in just 3 minutes. Produces juicy, tasty food that is unmatched by any conventional grill. Maybe you're hitting the road and you want to have a staycation. Solaire has hot and fast, portable, built-in, and cart models. Right? Fast, portable. You can have a built-in or cart model to help you step up your grilling game. And Solaire infrared grills are made in the U.S. of A. They're built to last. Solaire grills deliver the wow that everybody likes to get in a gift or a major purchase. Learn more about the amazing Solaire infrared grills at besthotgrill.com. That's besthotgrill.com. When you talk to Rhett or Irene or anyone at Best Hot Grill, tell them I sent you and that Dwayne didn't. They're occasionally sponsors over at Dwayne's World as well, his wonderful podcast, but I like to put that in. Now, Rhett's a Naval Academy grad, so don't say go Army beat Navy for any reason whatsoever. But it won't matter. It'll still be a great grill. It's the kind of grill that Dad will say, really? You finally got me something I want? Or a graduate who is going to be living on a budget, but you're giving him something to make that budget go a long way in terms of impressing and making sure that they have something to look forward to, which is the best grilling in the world, besthotgrill.com. The breaking news at this hour is out of Israel, where earlier today, a massive Israeli airstrike on a bunker located underneath a hospital, the European hospital, left a huge hole in the ground, and we assume the death of Mohammed Sinwar. Sort of the last quasi-leader standing among Hamas. And we won't know for a while. It takes many days to confirm. They have to listen in. They have sources, they have spies all throughout the Hamas region and in Gaza. But may he have gone and followed his brother and Mohammed Diaf and all the other terrorists who started the war 585 days ago with the terrible invasion and massacre. At the same time, Vichy France is back. Macron, the president of Vichy France, announced that the EU may revisit cooperation pacts with Israel over the shameful Gaza policy. Not shameful. They were attacked. They're going after their hostages. They did not start the war, and they're not going to be Vichy about it. But Macron is Vichy France, and I think that they will ignore Macron as France ignores Macron, and he will be a distant memory before long. Let's go back to Donald Trump talking about hard power today, even as he exercised soft power in Saudi Arabia, cut number 17.
In recent weeks, following repeated attacks on American ships and freedom of navigation in the Red Sea, the United States military launched more than 1,100 strikes on the Houthis in Yemen. As a result, the Houthis agreed to stop. They said, we don't want this anymore. It's the first time you've heard that from them, too. They're tough. They're fighters. But just days ago, we were asked to cease targeting commercial. They were not going to be targeting commercial ships in any way, shape, or form, or anything American. And they were very happy that we stopped. But we had 52 days of thunder and lightning like they've never seen before. This was a swift, ferocious, decisive, and extremely successful use of military force. Not that we wanted to do it, but they were shooting down ships. They were shooting at you. They were shooting at Saudi Arabia. We don't want them shooting at Saudi Arabia, if that's okay. So we hit them hard. We got what we came for, and then we got out.
They got out, and now, at the same time he's talking about hard power, he extended, as I played earlier in the show, an end of sanctions to Syria in an attempt to see if Syria, the new government there, wants to engage with the West. And he said this about Lebanon, quick aside, cut number 18.
My administration stands ready to help Lebanon create a future of economic development and peace with its neighbors.
He also said, he spoke a little bit about Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates as being organically developed states, not nation building. Cut number 13.
Before our eyes, a new generation of leaders is transcending the ancient conflicts of tired divisions of the past and forging a future where the Middle East is defined by commerce, not chaos, where it exports technology, not terrorism, and where people of different nations, religions, and creeds are building cities together, not bombing each other out of existence. We don't want that. And it's crucial for the wider world to note this great transformation has not come from Western interventionists or flying people in beautiful planes giving you lectures on how to live and how to govern your own affairs. No, the gleaming marvels of Riyadh and Abu Dhabi were not created by the so-called nation builders, neocons, or liberal nonprofits like those who spent trillions and trillions of dollars failing to develop Kabul, Baghdad, so many other cities. Instead, the birth of a modern Middle East has been brought by the people of the region themselves, the people that are right here, the people that have lived here all their lives, developing your own sovereign countries, pursuing your own unique visions and charting your own destinies in your own way. It's really incredible what you've done. In the end, the so-called nation builders wrecked far more nations than they built, and the interventionists were intervening in complex societies that they did not even understand themselves. They told you how to do it, but they had no idea how to do it themselves.
Going back to the aftermath of the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan, when had we followed the Powell rules, get in, get out? It's easy to see in hindsight. We tried our very best, didn't work, but we can hope that in 50 years, Baghdad and Kabul, well, not Kabul, we can hope that Baghdad becomes like Riyadh and UAE and modernizes. And we can hope that Persia, Iran, throws off the burden of this fanatical regime that does not represent the people of Iran. They want to be free too. Now, Donald Trump is there primarily to do business. He sat down with MBS, the Saudi crown prince, and talked at the business forum before he gave his formal speech. A little informal aside, cut number 5.
As you know, we have the biggest business leaders in the world here today, and they're going to walk away with a lot of checks for a lot of things that you're going to provide. And in the United States, it's probably 2 million jobs that we're talking about this visit. So, number one, I like visiting with you, and we've known each other very well, and I really believe we like each other a lot. And number two, for the United States, we've brought tremendous investment in and tremendous jobs, and we'll continue to service your great country very well.
They get along. That's great. He gets along with Netanyahu. That's great. Gets along with NBC. That's great. MBZ is the leader of the UAE. That's great. What's also great is the economy at home. S&P 500 has wiped out all their losses this year. The Nasdaq's in a bull market. And Scott Bessent, who's over at the U.S. Saudi Investment Forum, took to the stage to talk about why a second Trump boom is taking shape. Cut number 4.
The Trump economic agenda really consists of 3 parts. Thus far, we have seen trade, which has gotten most of the publicity, and President Trump wants to reorder the U.S. engagement with other countries. And I will tell you that the tariffs, the non-tariff trade barriers, currency manipulation, and subsidies of labor and capital are coming down quickly. So I am optimistic that on trade, we could actually see more frictionless trade globally. The second part of the agenda, which is moving better than I would have expected, And as a newcomer to Washington, I would say that it was my highest level of anxiety was the tax bill. The 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was not passed until December, just before Christmas of President Trump's first year. I believe that we will have it passed this summer, and we will make the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act permanent. We will add more features that are very friendly to capital. We're going to bring back 100% expensing. If you build a factory, in the U.S., you can expense it immediately. The equipment for that factory can be expensed in the first year, and we think that that will be very powerful. That was the most powerful aspect of driving growth and jobs during President Trump's first term. And I believe that the permanence, so we will no longer be talking about tax cuts. Once this bill becomes permanent, this will be the law of the land for the U.S., and there will be great certainty on the tax side. And then the third side is deregulation. And I think really when I look at the kingdom, when I look at the U.S., the one thing I see is great optimism and a can-do attitude.
I also see a lot of growth. I also see Relief Factor, which sponsors this studio, and I remind you about it every hour. Don't forget to take your Relief Factor. Some of you listen right now, you're in your cars, you're on your way home, and your back hurts, or your knees hurt, or your ankle hurts, or something hurts. Have you tried Relief Factor? Call 1-800-4 and the word relief. You say, why should I try it? Well, it works for me. I've only taken one supplement for 20 years, and that is Relief Factor, which I've taken daily for 10 years. Relief Factor works. Icarian and curcumin, resveratrol, and omega support your body's anti-inflammatory system. It gets rid of a lot of the minor aches and pains that come with exercise, aging, and commuting. So call 1-800-4 and the word relief. Get the starter pack for $19.95, less than $1 a day. Or visit their website and find their starter pack offer there at relieffactor.com. That's relieffactor.com. Trust me, it works. You'll love it. You'll thank me. relieffactor.com. Joined by David Drucker, senior writer for The Dispatch. David, good afternoon. I want to read you a couple of paragraphs from the New Yorker excerpt of the new book by Jake Tapper and Alex Ward. Quote, we got so screwed by Biden as a party, David Plouffe, who helped run the Harris campaign, told us. Plouffe had served as Senator Barack Obama's presidential campaign manager in 2008 and as a senior advisor to President Obama before largely retiring from politics in 2013. After Biden dropped out of the race on July 21, 2024, Plouffe was drafted to help Harris in what he saw was a, quote, rescue mission. Harris, he said, was a, quote, great soldier, but the compressed 107-day race was, quote, a blanking nightmare. And it's all Biden, Plouffe said. By deciding to run for re-election and waiting for more than 3 weeks after the debate about, Plouffe added, he totally blanked us. The real issue wasn't age per se, it was the clear limitations of his abilities, which got worse throughout his presidency. What the public saw of his functioning was concerning. What was going on in private was worse. It goes on. David, one, I'm not surprised. We didn't have a president for obviously at least 6 months, probably more than a year. 25th Amendment didn't work. I was calling him infirm from 2022 forward. Do you think there's any news in this book?
Well, I think the news in the book, at least based on this excerpt, which I did read earlier today, is what Democrats and Democratic activists and donors were seeing behind the scenes where there weren't cameras and there weren't reporters. And I think there's a big difference between, not politically, so let me say, politically, there's no difference in what we're reading, let's say, in this excerpt and what voters were seeing with their eyes and how they reacted to it. But I think what we're reading in this excerpt is sort of is substantiated, unequivocal proof that the president had really slowed down and that there were serious questions about the extent to which he was able to do his job.
So, David, I've got nothing against Tony Blinken. We have many friends in common. Ditto Jake Sullivan. Ditto General Milley. Nobody said anything. I mean, shouldn't they have resigned? Maybe you don't rat out the boss because you're a loyalist, but do you keep working with someone who's infirm and pretending that he's not infirm? Shareholders would have a shareholder suit against the CEO's C-suite if they covered up like this.
Well, I think we have to understand I think to make that judgment, we'd have to know who saw what and when they saw it. But I think you raise a good point in that it is we have seen over the years that senior cabinet officials, senior staff in the White House is very hesitant to do anything to damage the president, because the belief is always that the president is somehow, I don't want to use the word infallible, but that somehow everything is fixable as long as it can be presented well. It was very interesting to read how Schumer, according to Tapper and Thompson, reacted to his telephone calls with President Biden, right? Where Biden would be forgetful in certain ways, and Schumer's reaction was not to be concerned about the presidency and how it was being run, but about the optics. And that is a very common thing in Washington.
Alex Thompson is the co-author with Jake Tapper. I said Alex Ward. I apologize for that. It's Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson, and it's online, so people can go and read it. I read the earlier book by John and, Amy, and they all have, everybody knows this. I mean, I'm sure the book will sell for the salacious part. They had access to some Democrats, and they're going to get a real read, but 107 days doesn't really tell the story. Kamala Harris got $1.5 billion, David. She was just an awful candidate that was burdened by a really sort of out there old man who stepped on her big story. Remember? He went on air when she was on the mall.
Well, political players are always willing to say things after a campaign, particularly if their candidate lost, that they're never going to say beforehand. And when you were reading the opening of that excerpt in the New Yorker, and you didn't use the profanity that Pluff used. Look, I've been doing this a while. I've written a book where I was sort of depending on people to be candid with me after the fact. And this is the only reason I'm making this comparison. President Trump did not fade from the scene. And so I still ran into roadblocks where people didn't want to really tell me what they thought or what they saw. And it was nowhere near anything like this. But here you have people being very candid after the fact, and Pluff in particular using the profanity. If you read the book, and so I mean that's just what's really fascinating about this. But also I think what we will get from this book and others is all of the sort of backstory behind what was visible in public, and I still think that will be important and interesting.
David, do you notice at the same time the comparison between Donald Trump on the road doing 10 events a day in Saudi Arabia with that maniacal energy? He got more energy than anybody I know, and he's 10 years older than I am. He's just a machine, and the contrast with Joe Biden is so inescapable and damning. Have you been noting that as you go along?
Well, I think actually, it's been the topic of discussion, right? I mean, I think one of the things that, in a way has protected Trump politically from, let's say, questions about all of the executive orders and questions about the social media posts is not just the fact that the way he functions is now people are now used to it, right? It's not as shocking as it was 10 years ago, 8 years ago. But it's such a contrast to Biden, where people felt like he had just sort of disappeared. I mean, I as a citizen, not a journalist. A journalist, you always want access, and you want politicians to be present and give you something to write about. As a citizen, I'd sort of like some happy medium between Biden and Trump, right? They're present, they're doing the job, you can see it. They're not necessarily doing it on Sunday at 8 a.m. or Friday night at or whatever.
A happy medium is Scott Bessent. I want to offer him up as a happy medium. I think he is very impressive, and I think he's going to get this tax bill over the line. Do you think the tax bill is going to get over the line?
Well, I think the tax bill will get over the line one way or the other. I think what makes Bessent very effective so far is he seems to know how to manage Trump and still steer Trump in a direction that we're not always sure Trump wants to go. But the way Bessent does it seems like Trump doesn't necessarily mind getting there.
I agree with that completely, but I don't think he's managing Trump. I think he's persuading him. David M. Drucker on X, senior political writer for The Dispatch. Thank you, David. Don't go anywhere, America. I'll be right back. But I'll mention, do go to taxcutsnow.com because Secretary Bessent, President Trump, everybody on the team at Speaker Johnson's leadership team, Leader Thune's leadership team, they all need help. And give them that help at taxcutsnow.com. Job Creators Network is our sponsor. But I didn't even know that. I just want people to just jump on board and bring every voice to be heard, every song to be sung to taxcutsnow.com because we need to get that done so that the Trump boom happens sooner rather than later. Over at Fox News, I've got a column up on the Wonder Years Pope, Leo the 14th. Later in the day, I got sent a notice, a Google News notice, that I had been mentioned in a story by AP. Trump and Pope Leo are now the Earth's most powerful Americans. They lead in different roles and realms. Okay, fair enough headline. The contrast between President Donald Trump and Chicago-born Pope Leo XIV couldn't be more stark politically, personally, or in their worldviews. I actually think that's a biased headline because we don't know much about Pope Leo's worldviews. We know about his life choices. He chosen to serve the poor as a missionary, so it's a very different life choice. But I don't know what Pope Leo thinks about Iran. I don't think much. My guess is that he thinks China is a totalitarian state and probably wants to back out of France's ill-conceived deal with the Chi-Coms. I think Donald Trump would agree with that. The motto of one newly elected leader is fight. The other is to introduce himself with the world peace. Okay, that's just nonsense. Donald Trump said fight, fight, fight after he'd been shot in the head. God forbid that Leo gets shot in the head, but he might say fight, fight, fight if he were. The contrast between President Donald Trump and Chicago-born Pope Leo couldn't be more stark politically, personally, or in their worldviews. They lead in different roles and realms. This is just nonsense. This is just the AP attempting to say there's going to be a division here. Trump is known to not enjoy sharing attention or primacy, as his America First foreign policy makes clear. American Catholics chose Trump over his Democratic rival Kamala Harris. In one apparent appeal to them, Trump posted an AI-generated image of himself dressed as a pope in the days of mourning for Pope Francis. That's completely absurd. It wasn't an appeal to American Catholics. It was a joke. It wasn't in the period of mourning for Francis. It was long after he had been buried and the funeral was over and the conclave was imminent. And I don't know anyone who's offended, really, no one who's offended by it who's a Catholic. Pope Leo, meanwhile, in some sense is a politician as well. You think? The oldest political organization in the world, 2,000 years old Catholic Church, with a calm manner and approach of talking to his fellow cardinals in small groups before the conclave. Well, yeah, he was running for Pope. Yet it's only an electorate of 133 people. You don't do rallies. He wouldn't be the first Pope to wade into politics. No. Actually, John Paul the Great brought down, with the help of Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, the triumvirs of freedom, brought down the Soviet Union. And like Trump, Leo has turned his attention to the media. And I just think this is nonsense. Utter nonsense. The AP is lost. The AP is ruined. There's nothing going to happen to the AP other than go bankrupt eventually because people are tired of their nonsense. Now, Thursday. Big argument in the Supreme Court. I'm hoping that it happens in the morning and Generalissimo gets me some cuts. The argument is over the executive order purporting to end birthright citizenship. I say purporting because I don't think it's going to work. I think birthright citizenship is tradition, fundamental, absolutely part of the who we are as Americans and part of our constitutional order. But it's a case of first impression. It hasn't been decided ever before. And so they're going to have arguments about it, but they're not going to have arguments on the merits of the EO. unless the court just decides to go forward and settle it. The federal government, which is expedited appeal up to SCOTUS, Solicitor General is going to argue, please tell these district courts to stop issuing nationwide injunctions. They don't have the power, they don't have the authority. They only have authority over the case and controversy before them. So if they want to enjoin the executive order in the district court jurisdiction of which they are a member, fine, but they can't issue these national injunctions. And that will be interesting to listen to. So there are two issues. The merits, which is on the executive order, and I suspect, and I believe the law will support, and a majority, if not 9 justices, will say birthright citizenship is the deal. You're born here, unless you were born to an accredited diplomat, you are an American citizen. But I also hope that at least 6, and maybe 7, 8, or 9 will say, hey, Article 3 district court judges, stay in your lane. Your lane is your district. Your lane is not the entire circuit or even a state. Your lane is certainly not the United States. We don't want these nationwide injunctions. You're destroying the credibility of the judiciary. Article 3 is the judiciary. You're destroying the credibility of the judiciary. Stop it. We are going to strike those down because they purported to do too much. That's on Thursday, not tomorrow, but I just thought I'd give you a little early hint, maybe get Dwayne on the case. Because I ran out of cuts today, so he'll get more cuts from me on Thursday. He did a good job, though. Trump's speech was very good in Saudi Arabia. I'm still in a good mood because the Cavaliers have not been eliminated, and they've been down 3-1 before. In 2016, they were down 3-1 to the Golden State Warriors, and the LeBron-led Cavs won that series in the championship. So let them know, Donovan Mitchell, Darius, Evan, Jarrett, Max, all of you people on the bench, let them know. 2 games in Cleveland, they can take both of those, 3-3. Then they're going to have to go back to Indiana in a big showdown game and win it all. I don't believe the Celtics are in this because Tatum suffered the unfortunate injury. That's the same thing that crippled the Cavs at the start of the series. They lost 2 All-Stars and 3 starters at the beginning of the series. I don't know how well they are, but they'll fight. They'll fight tonight, and I'll either be happy or morose tomorrow. But we will see. Now, I was expecting Lilacs, who's gone MIA on me, which is too bad because I had the perfect story for Lilacs. Khan makes it official. No nudity on the red carpet. Now, James would have something to say about that. I actually have nothing to say about that. And I had lined up a question for him about Mobland because James is a consumer of popular culture, and Pierce Brosnan and Helen Mirren and Guy Ritchie and Tom Hardy working together is pretty good streaming television. It is not for the faint-hearted. It is not for the easily offended. It is definitely R-rated, and you really hope that people like this don't exist. But it's interesting to watch, and interestingly enough, the fetching Mrs. Hewitt, who is usually gentle, she's the kind of people, she likes Call the Midwife, which is in season 8,432. I've never seen a minute of it. I'm off doing my exams or doing show prep or reading the Wall Street Journal, and she's watching Call the Midwife. You may never have heard Call the Midwife. Dwayne is addicted to it. Big Call the Midwife fan. And I was going to talk to him about that. Then I was going to guess with him, speculate with him about, Lilacs and I are about the same age as the Wonder Years Pope, Leo XIV. So James was in Fargo, and I was in Warren, so Leo XIV was between us. So I'm assuming his musical tastes are a little bit of Fargo and a little bit of Warren. And I'd like to start a pool on what albums does he have in the garage. Now, I don't know about you, but if you're from the age of vinyl, you don't throw them away. You pack them up tight so they don't warp, and you put them somewhere in the attic, and mine are up in a garage, and they sit there year after, and comic books. Year after year after. Now, I found a guy who wants my comic books. And my son loves comic books, but he's going to come into a boatload of comic books anyway. But mine are not very well organized, and primarily they're Marvel. I'm not a DC guy, but a guy I know in California wants them. I got the Fantastic Four wedding. I think that's worth $5 or something like that. But I like Thor the best, and Silver Surfer was pretty cool. I don't even know why we've never had a Silver Surfer movie. I was going to ask James that as well. So I had a lot of things to ask him. So I hope he's okay, because Dirigibles and Dining, his weekly podcast, which you can find at lilacs.com, is still very much worth your time and going. Then let me turn to the hard news. CPI, Consumer Price Index, was up 0.2% over the month, annual inflation at 2.3%. Now, please remember that under Joe Biden, after he spent all that money, it was 7 to 8%, and the underlying trend today rose to 2.8%. But the underlying trend doesn't matter to me too much, because the underlying trend was based on projections of economists on the trade deals not getting done, and they are getting done. Michael Gappin, chief U.S. economist at Morgan Stanley, said that previous U.S. tariff hikes show a lag time between implementation and inflation showing up in the data. What's sitting on the store shelves today is based on agreements that were made 2 to 3 months ago. That might be true, but I want to emphasize one thing. What I never hear economists talking about is substitution. If a good goes up in price because it's made abroad and it's subject to the 10% baseline tariff, you don't have to buy that good if there's a substitution for it. Now, sometimes there isn't. If you really love Mexican avocados, you're screwed. You're going to have to pay more for your Mexican avocados. Fetching Mrs. Hewitt likes Fallbrook avocados where she grew up, but also Mexican avocados. I don't care for avocados, so I'm not impacted by that. But if you like, the president has used the example of dolls and pencils. If you like dolls and pencils, I think Mattel makes some somewhere other than China. If they're not making any dolls in America, they should start making Barbies in America. I'm a little bit offended that they're not. I don't know if they're not. My college buddy, who was one of their deputy general counsels, forever retired, so I can't ask Cam if Barbie is actually made in America. But wouldn't it be obscene if Barbie wasn't made in America? And I do believe there's a fairly vibrant secondhand market in Monopoly games at a thrift store near you. There's always, if you find something is just too expensive because of the tariffs, all you'll have to do is a little more shopping. Or you can buy a made in America. Sea bags. Sea bags are all 100% made in America. Their price isn't going up because of the tariff. Everything made in America. There are lots of companies like that. So if you're looking for a wonderful gift for mom or dad at Christmas, or a bride-to-be, or an anniversary, and you don't want to pay a tariff, you have a thing against tariff price increases, go to Sea Bags, buy Sea Bags. And there are lots of other American-made. Trying to think of the menswear, which has the Great Dane on it. Rohrbach? Is it Rohrbach menswear? That's all made here. And there's lots of stuff. So the theory of substitution is if a good becomes too expensive, you simply substitute. The only thing you can't substitute are food basics and gasoline. Guess what's coming down? Gasoline. So I believe that people with Trump derangement syndrome only want to talk about how bad the tariffs are for the economy. I'm actually in favor of the 10% baseline tariff, not as a tariff, not because we're getting ripped off, but because no one's paying to protect the freedom of the seas except us. So it's not bad to have the world help us protect their shipping lanes. Like, they weren't kicking in to knock off the Houthis attacking the Red Sea. We did that. We stopped that. Very happy. Idan Alexander is home with his mother and father. They've been reunited. Very touching. The marks of his torture are obvious on his arms, in his walk, his 585 days in the tunnels and the dungeons of Hamas. And sometimes the news is what you don't hear and don't see. You see any American condemning the strike on the European hospital, that's its name, the European hospital in Khan Yunis? There was a Hamas bunker underneath. Not even the Nazis did that, right? They did not put their headquarters under the hospitals. The Nasrallah treatment for Mohammed, who's the brother of Sinwar, the last guy standing, the last remnant of their leadership. He got the Nasrallah treatment, 9 bombs, bomb after bomb after bomb, bunker buster, mini bunker busters, because they got to kill him to get to peace. So the news is that, we don't know if he's dead yet, we're hoping he's dead, but the news is that nobody in America said boo. There is no deal that Israel was supposed to stop the ceasefire. They cooperated with the release of Idan Alexander yesterday. They took their drones down. They agreed to a 2-hour pause in fighting, but no ceasefire. And today, the day after Idan Alexander gets out, they go in and they take out, probably, I have to assume Mohammed Sinwar is surrounded by the other senior, in air quotes, senior leadership of Hamas that is left. So another devastating blow to Hamas. You've got to think somebody in the Hamas chain of command is going to sell out everybody in order to save their own skin. All they have to do is pick up a cell phone that's not encrypted and start dialing for the IDF visit. They can give themselves up. They can white flag it. They can tell them where the hostages are. It can all be over tomorrow. And we ought to pray that it is, and I think that's what Donald Trump wants. But he also keeps saying, Netanyahu does what Netanyahu wants. There is no daylight. There is no daylight. So the Saudis want that. They would just like peace and quiet. The Emiratis would like that. Everybody would like that except Iran, and we don't care what Iran wants. They've just got to dismantle their nuclear program, either quietly and on their own with our observers, or, as the president told me last week, viciously from the air. Now, I saw a news report that our B-2s have moved. I'm not surprised. We don't leave them in one place for very long. But they can go back. They can go from anywhere in the world to hit targets in Iran. It was a demonstration of resolve, and the talks have broken down as far as I can tell with Iran. They said, we just want to, and we're not putting up with that. Wickoff, special envoy, threw down on them. So, more to report tomorrow on a very interesting and thus far very, very successful trip by President Trump and his team to Riyadh and on to Qatar and then to the United Arab Emirates and then home. And then we'll see what Israel does in Gaza. We saw a hint of what they're planning to do in Gaza today.